For the sake of my children. This is a love story of an Australian Christian girl who falls in love with a Saudi immigrant Muslim boy, then converts to Islam, marries her Arab lover, and travels with him to the Islamic world, and spent 10 years there. Then she returns to the first world and recounts the tragic experiences she lived with her Muslim husband and their 7 children in the third world, and writes them down in a book entitled Irshad and the Abuse of Muslim Women. It was written in English and translated in Arabic by the author Dr. A. Ahmed. Copyright. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in retrieval system, or transmitted in any form, or by any means without a prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer who may quote brief paragraphs in a review to be printed in a newspaper, general magazine, or a school journal. All characters in this book are fictitious, and any resemblance to real people, live or dead, is purely coincidental. Chapter 36: In search of her kidnapped and raped daughter. After her successful speeches in Paris, the capital of France, the Australian mother Irshad decided to return to Afghanistan and search for her eldest daughter Aisha, who had been kidnapped, raped, and imprisoned by Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid. Then she called the babysitter of her 6 children in Canada and asked her to extend her stay at her apartment in Toronto City. When the babysitter agreed to continue taking care of her children, Irshad decided to return to Kandahar city in Afghanistan. She now understood that such a trip involved high risks and might expose her to terrorist attacks. Despite this, the brave Australian mother is no longer a persecuted Muslimah, but rather a Christian woman who believes in God and knows that Afghanistan is not what it used to be. When she was living under persecution and violence and abuse, the country was controlled by the Taliban government and the Al-Qaeda group, while she was under the control of her abusive Muslim husband. But after NATO forces entered the country and removed the Taliban government from power, a lot of changes happened. The mother Irshad decides to travel undercover and pretend to be a Muslimah woman again. So she flew straight from Paris to Kabul. When she arrived at the international airport of the Afghan capital city, the white Australian woman was wearing the abaya and the Islamic niqab, wherefore no one was able to identify her as a foreigner until she reached the hotel. As she travels from the airport to the hotel, she is stunned by the changes that have taken place during those years she has spent abroad. She couldn't believe her eyes when she saw a woman walking the streets without their husbands or a muhram men, such as their fathers and brothers, accompany one of them. Young girls with backpacks are heading to their schools. Some women walk without their faces hidden behind the humiliating Islamic burqas, which were compulsory attires for every woman under the Taliban reign of terror. The Australian woman was also stunned when she saw some Afghani Muslim men wearing Western clothes, such as shirts and trousers. Despite this, the white foreign widow saw a thing of the past that still held the people of Afghanistan in the ancient dark ages of the 7th century AD, at the time of the Arab prophet Muhammad and his companions. Some Muslim women cover their faces completely like eerie black ghosts, and some Afghan men still grow terrifying long beards and dress like the Mujahideen terrorists she knows from her bitter past experience. From Kabul, the Australian woman flew to Kandahar the next day. Once in that hellish city, the horribly abused Australian woman recalled the dark years she spent with those Mujahideen barbarians and her cruel Arab Muslim husband Mustafa al-Shammari. It was as if She was re-watching a scary horror movie all over again when her mind began to reproduce those horrific memories of her torture and abuse. She could still see the innocent Canadian Muslim girl, Shahrazad, as she lay dying under those stones and bricks that had been thrown over her tender body, half buried in the hot earth when she was brutally stoned for her alleged adultery with her Syrian lover. She recalled her experience of being kidnapped and imprisoned in that tomb shrine for 2 days and her agonizing suffering with the head of the village of Sharaf al-Banat, the human beast who tried to rape her in his home. She also remembered the experience when she was being dragged fully naked on the street by the guards of the chief of the village, and all of them they start beating and about to stone her to death until the police of Kandahar rescued her. She recalled her unjust imprisonment for 12 months in a death concentration camp, euphemistically called the Nawashis Women's or a disobedient woman prison in Kandahar city. She couldn't believe she was able to survive in that dangerous prison. She knows that in that infernal city, she was subjected to many cases of abuse and violence, and her daughter was repeatedly raped by that evil old man, and she's still being abused and imprisoned until the present time. In her heart, she wished to find him and kill him with her own hands. She also remembered that this evil Muslim old man turned some of her children into slaves and beggars in the streets of Kandahar city, and her daughters into slaves for his Afghani wives. The same city reminded her of her 2 sons who were kidnapped from her hands at gunpoint and turned into terrorists and killed in the jihad war for the sake of Allah. She understood that her husband, the Arab Muslim terrorist Mustafa, was responsible for all the suffering and abuse that she and their 7 children went through. He also participated in the cowardly terrorist attacks in the United States of America on September 11, 2001, which claimed the life of 3,000 innocent Americans. Memories of those dark years made the Australian widow Irshad wish to undergo brain surgery to raise her memory and get her out of it forever. She would pay any amount of money to any doctor if he could erase from her brain the horrific memories of those 10 years of abuse and oppression she spent in the Muslim world with her terrorist husband and those ruthless Islamic mujahideen. As soon as she arrived in Kandahar city, the mother Irshad began searching for her daughter Aisha, who was kidnapped and raped years ago. She felt like looking for a needle in a haystack. She returned to the place where the mujahideen and their families used to live and train in the war of jihad for the sake of God against the so-called unclean infidels and the hypocritical and apostate Muslims. She remembered what had happened when she and her husband and their 7 children were stuffed like eggs in a carton box or squashed like sardines in a small tin in their filthy tent without windows and sanitary ventilation. Irshad found the place in ruins and not inhabited by any creatures, whether humans or animals. It seemed that even millions of vampire mosquitoes and billions of flies have migrated somewhere else. Thus, from the first day of her search in Kandahar city, the Australian mother had given up hope of finding her lost daughter. She learned from some people that all the Afghan Taliban fighters and the Arab Mujahideen have fled Afghanistan with their family and now are now hiding in the Swat Valley in Pakistan. Some of them hide in the caves of Tora Pora in the Indian Caucasus region in the mountain range of eastern Afghanistan. The Australian widow Irshad knows that she will impose the death penalty on herself if she dares to travel to the strongholds of the Taliban and Al Qaeda after the whole world learned that she had revealed the hiding place of the notorious white terrorist Sheikh Mohammed Noor al Faransawi. Moreover, her controversial religious speeches against Islam, which she delivered publicly in the capital of France, would be another factor that would prove her apostasy from Islam and her return to Christianity. At first, the foreign mother Irshad decided to give up the idea of finding her kidnapped daughter Aisha, but suddenly she remembered that Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid was living in his big mansion with his Afghan wives and their sons and daughters in the best area of the city. He used to come every morning to the camps of the Mujahideen, and he would return home late in the evening. Therefore, Irshad concluded that he was either still living in Kandahar with his many wives and offspring, or he had escaped during NATO airstrikes and strayed into the mountains or crossed the border and entered the Swat Valley in Pakistan. But Irshad, the Australian mother, doubted that the aged mullah would be able to escape with so many of his families and children in such a short time. She recalled how she, her 6 children, and many other families and their children had to flee the very day the foreign deadly airstrikes began. It took them several days to travel by animals and on foot to reach Pakistan. The mother Irshad's hope was revived when she came to this conclusion. So she decided to search for the evil old Muslim polygamist who loved to have sex with underage girls, like her 10-year-old daughter in Kandahar city. She found the task too difficult for her alone to find someone in such a large and populous city. She decided to hire some people to do the search for her. Therefore, she went to the city center, found some unemployed Afghans, paid them a lot of money, and told them that she was looking for a married Muslima girl named Aisha Mustafa Shambari. She told them that the girl was married to a man named Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid. By the way, in Muslim countries, a woman does not take her husband's last name after marrying him and will continue to bear her father's name and his family name until her death. Therefore, every Muslimah in the world, whether she is married or unmarried, carries her median name, which is very confusing and misleading to non-Muslims in Western countries. The mother Irshad promised to pay these hair workers more than 10 times what she gave them as an advance if they help her find her daughter, Aisha Shambari. While searching for the kidnapped and raped daughter, her Australian mother lives in a downtown hotel. She kept to herself most of the time inside her room. She does not want any of the Afghani people to recognize her, especially the woman who knew her during her stay with them in the Mujahideen camps. After a week of intense searching, an Afghani hired female searcher came with some information about her daughter. Although the name of the married woman found by the Afghani woman matched the name of her daughter, her husband's name was different. The wife's name is Aisha Al-Shambari, but her husband is known as Mullah Umar Bismillah, whose last name means in the name of God. This venerable Mullah Umar, in the name of God, is the Imam of the great mosque in the city center. The educated and intelligent Australian mother did not take another second to conclude that the wife was her daughter Aisha and that the husband Umar Bismillah, or in the name of Allah, was Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid himself. It is understanding that after the Taliban were ousted from power, the wicked mullah most likely changed his name to hide his identity as a former terrorist leader. If the new Afghani government finds out that he is one of the Taliban leaders who used to train the Mujahideen and send them to kill innocent people, he will be executed or sent behind bars for the rest of his life. The white foreign mother Shad decides to confirm her conclusion before going to the Afghani police and revealing the true identity of the evil old mullah. She understood that she would not be able to enter the house where the Afghani woman found her daughter Aisha without putting herself in danger. She knew that the evil terrorist man would do everything to prevent her from revealing his identity and put him in serious trouble with the new Afghani authority. Faris Irshad decided to go to the Grand Mosque in downtown Kandahar and find out if Mullah Omar Bismillah is the same Muslim old man who kidnapped, raped, and still abused and imprisoned her daughter Aisha in the name of permissible child marriage in Islam. After that, the Australian mother took a taxi from the hotel to the biggest mosque. She knew that women are not allowed to enter the mosque, so Irshad waited outside until the worshippers had finished the noon prayer and left in droves. She stayed inside the taxi and continued to check out the Afghan Muslim men who were emerging from the mosque in large groups, one after the other. After waiting for some time, the Australian mother saw that her sworn enemy who betrayed the trust, kidnapped and raped her minor daughter, who was 10 years old at that time, was coming out of the mosque, followed by some bearded Afghans. These Muslim men do for him what no rational person would do, even with his God. Some of them kiss his hands, and some of them kneel and kiss the ground that his feet touch, and others drink the dirty water that he had used during his ablution to clean his hands, feet, face, head, mouth, and nose, and others carry his belongings. To this day, the Imam of the mosque or the religious leader in Islam is treated in the same way that the Prophet Muhammad was treated in his time, except that Muslims today do not seek blessing from his spit and urine as the companions of the Messenger of Allah Muhammad used to do with his bodily waste after emptying his betrayed waste such as urine, feces, and spit. The brave Mother Irshad wished to have a weapon in her hands so that she could blow up Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid's forehead, where the prayer sign is located, which seemed to her like the sign of the beast 666 that mentioned in the book of Revelation of the Holy Bible about the Antichrist. Somehow the Australian mother, who was grieved by righteous anger, managed to control her wrath and waited until the humanoid beast got into his car and his chauffeur drove him away. Immediately, Irshad asked the taxi driver to follow his car. The taxi drove behind the Imam's car without his knowledge. When his car arrived at his large house, the angry white woman waited until he got out of his car and entered. Then she quickly wrote down his address and asked her cab driver to take her to her hotel. Inside the hotel, she contemplated her next move before leaving her hotel again. Instead of going to Kandahar City Police Headquarters, the white Australian foreign mother decided to take the matter up to NATO forces. Her experience with Muslim men in the Muslim world made her understand that the power of the Islamic police is more dangerous to society than any other government department. Instead of punishing her Arab husband Mustafa when he tried to kill her in the city of Dammam in Saudi Arabia, the Saudi police let him go. Moreover, when the evil chief of Sharaf al-Banat village, Sheikh Muhammad Ahmed, tried to rape her inside his home, The Sharia court directed his heinous crimes against her and sentenced her to 1 year in prison and to be flogged, releasing the rapist as a hero. Similarly, the Australian mother Irshad expected the same thing to happen if she filed her complaint against the kidnapper, rapist, and abuse of her daughter to the Afghani police. Deciding on her next step, Irshad changed her Islamic clothing, abaya and niqab, into a Western shirt and trouser. She pretended to be an Australian foreign reporter and walked toward this NATO checkpoint manned by Canadian soldiers. After being thoroughly vetted, the white Australian reporter Irshad was allowed to enter the military premises. Once inside, she spoke to a senior military general and told him that she had come to reveal the hiding place of a dangerous former Mujahideen leader. The senior general took her complaint seriously and asked her to give a full report on how she knew about the terrorist leader and where he was at the moment. When the brave Australian mother provided all the information required, an arrest warrant was issued for Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid, who is now known as Imam Omar Bismillah. That same evening, the Imam of the city's largest mosque, Omar Saitar Allah, was surprised when more than 30 foreign soldiers raided his house and arrested him. The arrest of the terrorist leader, Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid, who became known as Omar Bismillah, was one of the most important arrests that took place that year. The brave Australian woman learned that she deserves $50,000 in exchange for revealing the whereabouts of the terrorist leader, Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid, who changed his identity and claimed that he was the Imam of the Grand Mosque, Sheikh Omar Bismillah. Afghan police have listed him as one of the most wanted terrorist leaders, dead or alive, in the country. Mullah Abu Hamid was unable to deny his true identity as Irshad's daughter was found in his home with the 3 children she had with him. Aisha is approaching the age of 19 when she is freed from the tyranny of that evil old man who started raping and assaulting her since the age of 10. For 9 years, she was kidnapped, raped, imprisoned, and repeatedly abused by this sinister old Muslim man. When the Australian mother Irshad saw her beloved daughter Aisha after many years of painful separation, she did not know whether to cry or rejoice. She couldn't believe her eyes when she saw her daughter coming out of the evil old man's house with her 3 young children. She has 2 sons and 1 daughter from her kidnapper abuser. Australian mother Irshad started crying when she realized that the old Afghan mullah's wives had reduced her daughter to the status of a maid servant. Irshad hugged her daughter Aisha and started crying bitterly. Aisha recognized her mother Irshad and starts crying too. She didn't expect her Australian mother to come back to Afghanistan and look for her. The evil old man, Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid, has poisoned the mind of the little girl Aisha and made her believe that her mother left her with her siblings forever and fled to her motherland, Australia, the land of the Christian infidels, because she wants to marry a white man like her. Therefore, throughout those lean years, Aisha places the blame for her kidnapping, rape, persecution, pain, and torment of her and her siblings on her selfish Western mother, who abandoned her 7 children for the pleasure of this fleeting world. She did not know that her mother had returned to Mujahideen camps after she got in prison for 1 year in Kandahar city prison and had obtained custody of her children. The mullah lied to her and told her that her 6 siblings were sent to the family of their late father, Mustafa al-Shammar in Saudi Arabia because Islam forbids their adoption by him because he is not related to them by blood. In any case, on the same day, Mullah Abu Hamid was arrested, handcuffed, and dragged like a notorious criminal from his big house. And it happened that the Australian woman Irshad al-Shammari was with the military authority that arrested him. She defied all Western military restrictions and ran toward the kidnapper and rapist of her innocent child, Aisha, slapped him on the head and then spit on his face. She also grabbed his long beard and began to bully it, then put her hands on his neck and proceeded to strangle him until the cowardly mullah cried for escape from the white demon foreign woman before she strangled him to death. Some NATO commandos quickly responded and catch the enraged Australian mother Irshad before she can kill the old goat. Despite being subdued and brought under control, the angry white woman still kept cursing the evil mullah with all kinds of nasty Afghani words that suited him. Her righteous wrath was only calm when the general in charge who led the arrest team assured her that the terrorist leader, Mullah Abu Hamid, would never get out of prison. Either he will be spend the rest of his life behind bars, or he will be tried, convicted, and hanged to death by an Afghani criminal court for his terrorist crimes. Chapter 37. Irshad determined to shout from the rooftops and expose the evils of Islam. After freeing her beloved firstborn daughter Aisha from the hands of her evil kidnapper and abuser, the Australian mother Irshad ran into serious trouble when she tried to get her daughter and her 3 grandchildren out of Afghanistan. Firstly, none of the 3 children has a birth certificate. Secondly, Aisha is a married girl who is over 18 years old, and therefore the Australian mother, Irshad, will not be able to sponsor her daughter to immigrate to Canada. Even if the Canadian Immigration Authority agreed to grant her entry to the country with her 3 young children, the process would still take at least 6 months or more. The Australian mother, Irshad al-Shammari, knows that she will put her life in great danger if she stays for this long in Afghanistan. The Taliban terrorists will not let her leave for a second if they know that it was she who led to the arrest of 2 of their senior leaders, Sheikh Mohammed Noor al-Faransawi and Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid, the Imam of the Grand Mosque in Kandahar city. So Irshad understood that she had to leave Afghanistan as soon as possible. But she has no choice except to take her daughter and 3 grandchildren and go to hiding place until she finds a way to take them to a Western country. Even the general of the NATO troops who led the arrest of the Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid advised her to leave the country as soon as possible. Then the Australian woman paid large bribes to the passport office staff in Kandahar to obtain Afghani passport for her daughter and 3 grandchildren. Once the passport were issued, Irshad attempted to obtain visitor visas for her daughter and 3 children to the UK, but all of their applications were refused. Irshad contacted 3 other Arabian embassies, France, Germany, and Spain, and got the same refusal. She understood that the only Western foreign country that would accept her daughter and grandchildren was her native Australia. Aisha Mustafa Shammari was born in Sydney City and is therefore entitled to Australian citizenship, but her mother Irshad had no proof that her first daughter was born in Australia. The process of obtaining proof of her birth in Sydney City can take several months. The only safe secular country in the third world known to Irshad is India. So the mother went to the Indian embassy in Kabul city and applied for visitor visas. Embassy staff accepted their application and granted them 6 months of visitor visas. Immediately, Irshad flew from Kabul city to New Delhi city with her daughter and 3 grandchildren. Fortunately, the Australian woman has a good knowledge of the Indian capital because she has been in that city for 1 year. She rented a 3 bedroom apartment and began the process of verifying the birthplace of her firstborn daughter. During this process, she continued to hide her identity and pretended to be a Muslim woman. Meanwhile, Irshad hired a teacher who is a Hindu to teach her daughter and her grandchildren. Her daughter has not gone to school her whole life. She is 18 years old and still cannot read and write in any language in the world. Australian mother Irshad found another Indian teacher who is a Christian who agreed to teach Aisha and her 3 children English. The mother Irshad purposely refused to hire any teacher who is a Muslim to teach her daughter and her grandchildren because she doesn't want them to have any contact with Muslims. Aisha can speak English, Arabic, and Afghani, but she cannot write or read in any of these 3 languages. Every day, the mother herself spent many hours teaching her illiterate daughter and grandchildren to read and write in English. Although Irshad loves her grandchildren and treats them as her own children, she still hates their Afghani terrorist father with bitterness. She told her daughter that when her children grow up, she must tell them that their damning wicked Muslim father died a long time ago as a terrorist who carried out jihad and exploded himself in the cause of Allah. She does not want her grandchildren to have any connection with their abusive father to their innocent mother. Aisha recounted to her mother Irshad her bitter experience in marriage when she was 10 years old and how she was abused and exploited by the senior wife of Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid. How brutally the old mullah raped her as soon as their mother left them in his custody. It is very heartbreaking and painful to repeat what Aisha had to go through at the age of 10 at the hand of the evil and cruel old man. She recounted how the mullah's wives hated her and often beat her because the old man showed more interest in her than his other wives. And he believed because she's like the beloved wife of the Prophet Muhammad, the child bride Aisha, he loved her more than his old wives. Whenever the mullah went out of the house, the wives forced her to do all the work in the large residence and even forced her to massage and bath their bodies. She had to take care of the children of this Afghan woman and her own young children as well. Even foreign maid servants in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries are not treated the way Aisha was abused by this Afghan woman. The daughter confessed to her Australian mother that she had been raped several times by 3 of Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid's sons. From time to time, someone would attack her when she was naked in the bathroom, taking shower or using the toilet, or she was sleeping alone at night in her room, and he would rape her like a dog rapes its bitch. So the daughter believed that 1 or 2 of her children were born as a result of incest. It took the Australian embassy 6 months to verify Aisha's place of birth before she and her 3 children were granted entry visas to the country. Before they traveled to Sydney, the Australian mother Irshad took her daughter Aisha and her 3 grandchildren on a tour around New Delhi and visited the famous tourist site Taj Mahal in Agra city. The freed Australian woman did all she could in those 6 months to repair the damage and harm her daughter had been subjected to during those many years of enslavement and rape in the house of that evil mullah. Irshad then traveled with her daughter and grandchildren from New Delhi to Sydney. Shortly after their arrival in Australia, Suzanne Peterson entrusted the care of her liberated daughter Aisha and her three grandchildren to the care of her loving Christian parents. She opened a bank account for Aisha Mustafa Shammari and transferred 5 million US dollars from her account to her daughter's account. Then she made a joint account for her daughter and her parents. She asked her parents to spend as much of this money as they wanted it to educate and raise her daughter and grandchildren in the best possible way. Her parents agreed to take responsibility of the care of their granddaughter and great grandchildren and to do everything they could to ensure their well-being and education. All three children have been sent to a private Christian academic school. As for Rishad, she wanted it to spend the rest of her life with them, but she felt that God had called her to expose the evils that Islam had done to her, her daughter, and the rest of her children and grandchildren. She decided to never remain silent or follow any modern hoax theory that Western secular politicians call political correctness or fear anyone who might accuse her of a hate speech against Islam and the so-called religion of peace. She does not believe in Islamophobia and considers people's fear and hatred of Muslim terrorists and anti-woman teaching of Islam a natural feeling and should not be criminalized by any law. She believed that there are no more heinous crimes that one person can commit against another person than what happened to her and her children and grandchildren. So the daring and brave Australian woman who had been horribly abused decided to go everywhere in the civilized Western world and scream from the rooftops and expose the evils of the hadiths of God's alleged Prophet Muhammad and the misogynistic teaching of the Quran. Accordingly, before she left Australia and headed to Canada, where her other children are, Irshad swore before God Almighty that she would never rest or bow under any pressure until she made the entire world hear about her bitter experience with Islam. The first thing Irshad did was fly to Canada and then take her 6 children from Toronto City and sent them to her loving Christian parents in Sydney City. She deposited a large amount of money in the joint account of her parents and asked them to take care of her 6 children as well. Upon her arrival in Canada, the Australian woman gave a speech at one of the most famous Canadian universities. It is called McMaster University and is located in the city of Manitoba, Ontario province. Muslim students, immigrant Muslim families, and some Canadian professors who support Islam and consider it a religion of peace and love and treat the woman in the best status, interpreted her rhetoric as a hate crime against pacifists and may push the far-right wing to verbally attack or kill them in public places, in their homes, schools, mosques, and workplaces. As a result, she was banned by the administration of McMaster University, expelled by the police in an undignified manner, and banned from entering the premises of that Canadian university for the rest of her life. Chapter 38: The Mad Cow Gang in Canada. After returning from Australia, the brave woman Irshad Shammari decided not to confine her campaign against Islam to Toronto City, but to start speaking in several major Canadian cities. That is why she went to McMaster University in Hamilton in Ontario province. Islamic Religious Council in Toronto City took her to court, but its lawsuit was rejected by the judge of the criminal court. The Muslim complaint against the resettled religiously persecuted refugee woman Irshad Shammari was denied because it contradicts the freedom of speech that is granted by Canadian secular law. When the Muslim could not silence her with law and threats, they began planning her assassination. She received emails from many Islamic terrorist groups such as Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and Muslim Brotherhood, and other jihadist groups threatening to kill her if she is continued to speak out against the Prophet Muhammad's misogynistic teachings and other terrorist tenets of Islam. She ignored her life-threatening emails and continued to expose the evils of the horrific Arab satanic cult that mistakenly calls Islam the religion of peace. When nothing frightens or silences her, a secret deal is struck between Saudi Arabia and a gang in Canada. The gang was initially set up by some African immigrants living in Canada who are originally from South Sudan. The gang is called the Crazy Cow Gang or a Mad Cow Gang. It is the most dangerous and notorious gang in Western Canada. The gang at first was just like any other gangs, but when its leadership fell into the hands of some Muslim terrorists, it became the most egregious gang in North America. It defies Canadian law and police authority and overruled all other gangs. For the first time in human history, Muslim terrorists and gangsters are uniting together. There is a lot that can be said about that Crazy Cow Gang, but the most important thing is that some of the converts to Islam joined the gang when they were in prison, and when they came out, they became the main leaders of the group. There is a rumor that gang members have infiltrated the Canadian police of RCMP, but whether or not this rumor is true is difficult to verify. During her short stay in a hotel after speaking in a Canadian city, the Mad Cow Gang managed to successfully plan the kidnapping of the Australian woman Richard Shemery. Three gangsters entered the hotel and kidnapped her at gunpoint. Unfortunately, when these gangsters came, there were no armed security guards in that hotel to stop them from carrying out their kidnapping of the Australian woman. The only security man sitting in front of the main entrance of the hotel was not carrying a firearm and therefore could do nothing to prevent those dangerous armed men from executing the kidnapping plot. Some of the hotel staff stood helpless and begged for their lives when the gang members brandished their weapons in their faces. When the police arrived at the hotel, the gangsters were already gone with their kidnapped victim. The police interrogated the hotel staff in the hope of obtaining some clues that would lead them to the identities of the kidnappers, but all their inquiries were in vain. Even the surveillance cameras did not reveal anything about these daring kidnappers. The cameras showed that the three kidnappers wore masks to hide their faces. The hotel security guard and other staff members thought those guys were wearing coronavirus masks. The police concluded that the kidnappers were most likely Muslim terrorists. The kidnapping of the Australian woman Richard Shemery took place in a large city called Winnipeg in Western Canada, which is the capital of the province of Manitoba. This is the last place on earth the Australian woman would have expected the hands of Islamic terrorists to reach her. However, it seemed that Canada had become like the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, Spain, Germany, and France, as Muslim terrorists have spread to every city and town. Many people considered the kidnapping of Australian Irshad the end of her life. Everyone concluded that her captors had already executed her. The city police did not leave any effort or a stone unturned while searching for her murdered body. The police conclude, like everyone else, that terrorists may have indeed assassinated the kidnapped Australian woman Irshad. The Islamic world rejoiced and celebrated on the street the news of the kidnapping and assassination of what they call the enemy of Islam and Muslim, the hateful Australian woman Irshad Shemery. But non-Muslim countries received the news with sadness and horror. Many journalists have concluded that Islam is like the mafia gang that no one can join, live, or criticize without suffering physical annihilation. Even if the person was born and brought up in that religion, he could only live it under the pain of death. However, An RCMB agent raised some doubt about Winnipeg City Police previous finding where the kidnapping was committed. He suspected that the kidnappers were Islamic terrorists. He claimed that if the kidnappers were religious terrorists, why did they not assassinate the Australian Irshad in the same hotel? What is their motive for kidnapping her? Most likely, they may demand millions of dollars to be paid for the release of their captive woman. These kidnappers probably knew that the US government paid $50 million to Irshad to uncover the hideout of the notorious French terrorist leader Mohamed Noor al-Faransawi. This new series emerged after the police gave up hope of ever finding the body of the Australian woman Irshad. This conclusion redirected police attention to the possibility that a Canadian gang was behind the kidnapping. This new series has an important question that needs to be answered before the police can drop the previous conclusion and focus on it, which is the reason for the possibility of a gang kidnapping the controversial Australian woman because of her talk about Islam and its prophet. The first evidence appeared when the police spotted the face of a former notorious gangster in one of the surveillance cameras kept at the main entrance of the hotel. This man entered the hotel with two other suspicious men on the same day that the Australian Irshad was kidnapped at gunpoint. The police immediately connected the dots and concluded that the three gangsters had covered their faces with coronavirus masks after entering the hotel. The police conducted a thorough investigation of this suspected man. He was recently released after serving his sentence in a maximum security penitentiary. During his stay in prison, the man was converted to Islam by some of the Muslim prisoners who are still in prison. This startling discovery has refuted the new theory and revived the earlier conclusion that the Australian woman Irshad Shambari had been kidnapped by Muslim terrorists. So the police started searching for that man. The police know that the man was a former senior leader in the notorious gang called the Mad Cow Gang. He was known as Nicholas Johnson before he converted to Islam. He is from a Christian background and was born into a Catholic Canadian family. After his conversion to Islam, he changed his name to Bilal Ahmed. He has become a deeply religious man during the last 2 years in prison. He grew a long beard and began to recite the Holy Quran and pray regularly with Muslim inmates. Somehow, Bilal's religious behavior convinced the prison authority that he had become a righteous man, and he was subsequently released on parole before completing half of his prison sentence. Shortly after his parole period ended, Bilal Ahmed visited Saudi Arabia and performed Hajj ritual in the cities of Mecca and Medina. Upon his return to Canada, he brought with him a Somali girl who he said was his Muslim wife. Then the police arrested the Muslim man Bilal Ahmed and interrogated him. At first, he denied having visited the hotel that day. But when confronted with the video, which showed very clearly at what time and on what day he was spotted entering the hotel with the other two men, Bilal claimed that he had completely forgotten about his visit to Somali relative, his beloved wife, Somali woman Halima Saadia, who was in the hotel that day. The police were able to verify Bilal's claim when it appeared that a Somali man was staying at the hotel on the same day as the kidnapping took place. So the police allowed him to go home but kept him under surveillance. It happened that 2 days after the day some Muslim terrorists kidnapped the Australian Irshad, the police made a startling new discovery. Bilal movements, contacts, telephone conversation, and email correspondence were carefully monitored by the RCMP after his interrogation and release. He sent an email from a public library to someone. Canadian police traced the recipient of this email to a computer in Saudi Arabia. In his letter, Bilal Ahmed informed the recipient that the boys are not ready to hand over the woman to him until he deposits their shares in the bank. The letter also included 2 bank accounts in Canada. The police identified the account holders as active members of the Mad Cow Gang. The police also told the Bank of Montreal to freeze any funds deposited that day into these 2 accounts. However, the police did not make any arrests until the money was deposited into those accounts. The amount deposited is $15 million in each account. However, under instruction for the Canadian RCMP, the bank did not show the funds in the 2 suspicious accounts. Once the police learned that the money had been transferred to the Bank of Montreal, they arrested Bilal Ahmed. At first, the police were unable to find the other 2 men. Bilal tried to deny his involvement in the kidnapping, but when confronted with evidence, he spoke up and revealed the entire plot from A to Z. Through it, the police were able to locate these 2 criminals. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police were surprised 2 gang members at the First Nature Reserve in Manitoba in a small house. The police found the kidnapped Australian woman Irshad Shamari imprisoned in a deep hole. Since the day she was kidnapped from the hotel, she has been imprisoned by her captors in a remote reservation for First Nation people who were the Aboriginals of Canada and previously were known as Red Indians. Irshad was kept in the deep pit dug for her burial and final grave. Her kidnappers plan to bury her alive after they get their financial shares from the Saudis involved with them, who promised to pay them millions of dollars in exchange for killing the worst female enemy of Islam, the Australian woman Irshad Shamari. But the kidnappers refused to kill the victim until the money was deposited into their accounts. Being an ex-gangster, Bilal understood that the kidnappers of the Mad Cow Gang would not tell him where they took and hid the Australian woman Irshad unless their shares in the terrorist plot were paid. To avoid running into the police again, Bilal did not contact his partner in crime, Saudi Arabia, until he saw the Canadian police were no longer watching him. So he used a computer in a public library and sent an anonymous email to the Saudi sheikh who had recruited him for the kidnapping and assassination mission. Fortunately, the Canadian police rescued the kidnapped Australian Irshad alive and well from her kidnappers, who were about to kill her after receiving their shares of the money. It was breaking news for the entire world when the Winnipeg City Police announced that the Australian Irshad Shamari had been rescued from her captors alive and unharmed by them. They didn't even rape her, despite her beauty and sexy naked body. They had stripped her of all her clothes, even her underwear and bra, before throwing her completely naked into the hole they had prepared for her grave inside and burying her alive. After the arrest of the other 2 men, Canadian police were able to unravel the entire plot with its roots in Saudi Arabia. First of all, the RCMP traced the account through which $30 million were transferred into the accounts of the kidnappers to a sheikh of the royal family in Saudi Arabia. The government of Saudi Arabia denied any role in the plot. The ambassador of that country in Ottawa City said that the sheikh who paid the sum acted independently without the knowledge of any member of the royal family or a Saudi police intelligence. This rock Saudi sheikh is the so-called lone wolf who masterminded it and planned the kidnapping of the Australian Umar Irshad Shamari alone. Despite this denial, the Saudi government refused to hand over the sheikh, the conspirator in the kidnapping and attempted murder of Irshad, to the Canadian government for trial. Therefore, the ambassador said that he would be tried before a Saudi criminal court in the city of Riyadh. This situation created some tension between the two countries, Canada and Saudi Arabia. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police has collected sufficient evidence indicating the involvement of some sheikhs of the royal family in Saudi Arabia in the kidnapping of the Australian woman Rashad Shamari and plotting to assassinate her for what she had said about their Islamic religion, their Quran, and their Prophet Muhammad. However, the Saudi police denied any connection between these royal princes and the plot. The confession of the Muslim terrorist Bilal Ahmed and other Canadian kidnappers active in the Mad Cow Gang revealed that the plot to kidnap and kill Irshad Shamir was hatched in the city of Mecca when Bilal went to perform the Hajj pilgrims in Saudi Arabia. While performing the Hajj rituals, he became acquainted with some men who belonged to a Somali terrorist group known as Al-Shabaab, or a Muslim used for jihad. When these terrorists learned that Bilal was from Canada, they seized the golden opportunity and convinced him to plan the assassination of the fairest enemy of Islam, the cursed Australian woman Rashad Shamari, who became an apostate Muslim woman after the martyrdom of her brave Saudi husband Mustafa in America in 9/11. The Somali terrorists gave Bilal a beautiful virgin Somali girl as his Muslim bride and then presented him to a wealthy Saudi sheikh known as Prince Osman bin Zaidan al-Tamimi al-Qurashi. This prince claimed to be a direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, and therefore his great-grandfather is the founder of Islam himself. Then this royal sheikh had linked Bilal with other sheikhs of the royal family. These sheikhs promised to pay $50 million to Bilal if he planned and carried out the assassination of the controversial Australian spokeswoman Irshad Shamari. But Bilal was told that he would not be paid a single dollar until the apostate Muslima, who became an infidel Christian woman, had been kidnapped and killed. Bilal Ahmed accepted the secret deal and promised to assassinate the Australian woman, Irshad Shamari, the infidel Christian woman who always speaks blasphemy everywhere against Islam, the Holy Quran, and the infallible Prophet of God, Muhammad. Once Bilal was back in Canada with his new Somali wife, Halima Saadia, he began looking for some gangster to hire. He contacted some of his former Mad Cow Gang members and revealed the secret deal to them. But Bilal lied about the actual amount of the reward that the Saudi sheikhs of the royal family promised to pay him for the assassination of the Australian white woman Irshad Shamari. He told the crazy Black Cow Gang men that the amount was $30 million and promised to pay it in full to the members of his gang if they succeeded in kidnapping and assassinating the white female devil who hates Islam more than she hates the smell of her dirty boob. Bilal decided to get $20 million and pay $30 million to the two men who agreed to join him in the kidnapping assassination plot. Then the terrorist Bilal Ahmed used the name of his Somali Muslim wife Halima Saadia and opened an account in a bank in Switzerland. Then he called the Saudi sheikhs and gave them his wife's account number and asked them to deposit $20 million into that account. But the Saudi sheikhs insisted that they would not deposit a single dollar until the kidnapping and killing mission was successfully completed. When the kidnapping took place, the sheikhs demanded strong evidence that the accursed infidel Christian woman was kidnapped and killed for her blasphemy against Islam, the religion of peace. They wanted to assassinate her because she always claimed that she was a Muslimah woman and married a Saudi Muslim man named Mustafa Shambari, who, according to her false claim, participated in the attacks of September 11, 2001. Howbeit, the Muslim terrorist Bilal Ahmed was unable to provide such proof of the assassination of the kidnapped woman Irshad to the royal sheikhs because his two other gangsters insisted that they would not kill their captured Australian victim unless they were bed first. Moreover, they hid their captive woman in a deep hole on a remote Canadian First Nation reservation, thus keeping her out of the reach of their former gang mate Bilal Ahmed. Accordingly, Bilal tried to persuade the Saudi sheikhs to pay the money first if they wanted him to convince the members of the crazy Black Cow gang to hand over the Canadian Christian infidel woman and slaughter her with his knife as he slaughters a goat. He promised that he would videotape the assassination of the damning woman and then send the video to the sheikhs. For some time, neither side was willing to compromise on its condition. On the one hand, the gangster demanded that the Arab princes must pay their shares first and then hand over the victim to their colleague Bilal, while the Saudi sheikhs refused to pay until they had evidence of the murder of the abducted infidel woman. For some time, the Canadian Muslim terrorist Bilal Ahmed could not convince either side. Finally, the Saudi princes who belonged to the royal family of Ibn Saud agreed to pay $30 million to the two Canadian kidnappers first, and then to pay $20 million to the terrorist Bilal Ahmed after he sent evidence of the assassination. So when the rich princes deposited the $30 million into the two bank accounts of the kidnappers, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police RCMP intervened in the lack of time and rescued the kidnapped Australian woman Irshad Shambari from the assassination of the Muslim terrorist Bilal Ahmed and the dangerous BSE gang members. If the Bank of Montreal showed the $30 million in the accounts of the two members of the Canadian Mad Black Cow gang, the Australian Irshad Shambari would have become another terrorist statistic. Fortunately, after the trial of the terrorist Muslim man Bilal Ahmed and the other two members of the Mad Cow gang, the Canadian Criminal Court in Winnipeg ruled that the victim Irshad Shambari must receive the $30 million that the rich Saudi sheikh deposited in the Bank of Montreal in exchange for kidnapping and assassination. The judge of the Canadian Secular Court said while issuing the fair verdict that the money is compensation for the torture and physical violations that the Australian kidnapped victim Irshad Shambari went through during her abduction and imprisonment in a deep hole in the reservation of the First Nation of the Indigenous inhabitants of Canada, who were known in the past as Red Indians, by two members of the Mad Cow gang and their partners in crime, the Muslim terrorist Bilal Ahmed and the Saudi sheikh Osman bin Zaidan al-Tamimi al-Qurashi. The huge compensation from the money that the Australian mother Irshad Shambari received from the Bank of Montreal assured her that God is always with her, and that, as the Apostle Paul said in the Holy Bible in his epistle to the people of the Church of Rome. And we know that all things work together for the good of those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. Romans chapter 8 verse 28. For the three criminals, Bilal Ahmed and two of the Mad Cow gang, they were sentenced to life imprisonment in a maximum security penitentiary in Canada without the opportunity of applying for parole for any of them. This is the third time that the brave Australian mother Irshad Shambari has received huge financial compensation for causing the arrest of dangerous Muslim terrorists. The first time she got $50 million as a reward for discovering the hideout of the dangerous white foreign terrorist leader Mohammed Noor al-Faransawi, who was a senior leader of the Al-Qaeda and Taliban groups. The second time she received $50,000 to help identify and arrest the terrorist leader Mullah Sheikh Mohammed Abu Hamid, who disguised himself as the Imam of the great mosque in Kandahar city and changed his name to Imam Umar Bismillah, or the cheat of Allah. The same time she was compensated $30 million for kidnapping her and attempting to assassinate her in a cruel and inhuman way, and for the arrest of the Muslim terrorist Bilal Ahmed, who was known before his conversion to Islam in prison as Nicholas Johnson. Muslims all over the world became extremely angry because they saw that the Australian apostate Muslim woman Irshad Shamari, who hates Islam and the religion of peace, would use these huge funds from the millions of US dollars that she obtained it easily to write and publish books and videos of her speeches against the noble Quran and the blessed hadith of the infallible messenger of God, Muhammad, whom Allah has sent as mercy to mankind. She would do that for the purpose of promoting and spreading her hatred and lies against Islam, the religion of peace. Chapter 39. The bullet of Islam hits again. After her miraculous rescue and release in Canada from a joint group of Saudi and Canadian Muslim terrorists and gangsters, the brave Australian woman Irshad Shamari returned to her home country and lived in Sydney City. She decided to be a little careful in her movements as she carried out her religious campaign while exposing the evils of Islam. She has focused her travels and speeches in the inner cities of her native Australia. She decided to be near her loving Christian parents, Frank Peterson and Mary Peterson, her 8 children and her 3 grandchildren. She started writing and publishing some books that carried the same message that she used to speak wherever she went around the world before she was kidnapped by Muslim terrorists in Canada. Her published writings and recorded speeches were purchased by many Australian Christians who began sharing and distributing them with other believers in their churches. For quite some time, the controversial Australian spokeswoman had not been attacked or kidnapped by any Muslim terrorist or jihadist group. The defining moment in the life of the Australian brave woman Irshad Shamari came when she delivered her speech on open ground in Sydney City. She had never spoken in an open public space before that day. It so happened that all the Protestant churches of Sydney City decided to hold an open crusade meeting and invited everyone to it. The courageous Christian woman speaker Irshad Shamari was invited to be one of the keynote speakers for that public religious crusade. Despite warning from the police, the controversial speaker Irshad accepted their invitation and came to speak to the crowd on the open ground. Sydney police did everything they could to ensure the safety of the Australian woman targeted by Muslim terrorists and the other speakers. All Muslim religious leaders and imams of mosques in Australia called on Muslims to boycott that general crusade organized by the so-called Christian infidels who are haters of Islam and enemies of God and his Prophet Muhammad. They likened the crusade campaign to the ancient Catholic crusades that liberated Jerusalem city from Islam in the 11th century and killed many Muslims at the time. Despite the warning and incitement of Muslim leaders, some Muslim intellectuals were invited by their Christian friends who brought them to the open Christian crusade. On that public crusade, the powerful speaker Irshad delivered one of the most controversial speeches that no one had ever dared or anyone could then say. She explicitly condemned the two sacred Islamic texts, namely the Holy Quran and the Hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad, and considered them the main source of terrorism in the world and the reason behind the abuse, oppression, and violence perpetrated against Muslim women and female children by Muslim men. Accordingly, she demanded that these Islamic religious texts be banned all Western countries. In her speech, Irshad stated that the problem of terrorism will not be solved by military fighting against the terrorists of Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, the Muslim Brotherhood, the Mujahideen of ISIS, Boko Haram, Hamas, Hezbollah, Al-Shabaab, and Janjaweed. If the American Marines or other NATO forces remain in Afghanistan for 100 years, they will not be able to defeat the Mujahideen of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, who are the true Muslims. Likewise, the 75 countries that joined the US-led coalition will not eradicate the Islamic Caliphate of ISIS and other terrorist groups in Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Iran, Pakistan, Indonesia, Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Somalia, Nigeria, Sudan, Lebanon, Israel, and the rest of the 55 Muslim majority countries in the world. She explained this point by saying that the Muslim Mujahideen with whom she lived for many years in Afghanistan are not military soldiers. They were not trained to fight as army soldiers, but as suicide bombers. Besides, the Mujahideen are invisible enemies who are impossible to identify and fight against as military combatants wearing military uniforms that should distinguish them from innocent, defenseless citizens. They can move freely among other citizens without being identified and blow themselves up without being suspected before they carry out their cowardly terrorist attacks. The Muslim militants of the Mujahideen of the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and other terrorist groups do not aim to win the battle against the NATO forces or the American Marines, but rather to intimidate and terrify their enemies of the infidels, hypocritical Muslims, and apostates who are allied with enemies of Islam. The brave Australian woman Irshad Al-Shammari concluded her speech by saying that the only way to defeat Islamic terror is to expose its sources and causes and ban it globally. She said that for this reason, the problem of Islamic terrorism will not disappear from the contemporary world unless the two main texts of Islam, namely the Quran and the Hadith of the Prophet Muhammad, are banned. While the controversial speaker Irshad Al-Shammari was coming down from the podium, someone shot her at close range in the back side of her head. The bullet hit her head from behind and entered her skull. She was immediately taken to the hospital by ambulance. At the hospital, the bullet was removed from her head, but she remained in a coma. The brave Australian woman, Irshad Al-Shammari, stayed in the intensive care unit for several days before she was released from her long comatose state. Although she regained consciousness, she couldn't recognize anything around her. Doctors who would supervise her treatment discovered that the bullet severely damaged her brain. As a result, Irshad completely lost her memory. She did not know who she was, and she could not even remember her own name. Her Christian parents, her 8 children, and her 3 grandchildren all became strangers to her. At that time, the mother Irshad Al-Shammari had 8 children with her in Australia. 5 of them are the children of her late Saudi Muslim husband, Mustafa Shammari, who was her classmate at a college in Sydney, and her eldest son, who was born from her first lover, who was a foreign Buddhist Chinese student, who was also her classmate at the University of Sydney. Her twin sons, Hassan and Hussein, were born to an Indian soldier who participated in her gang rape in the military camp in Kashmir province on the border of Pakistan. Her two sons, Abu Bakr and Umar, were killed in jihad in the way of Allah against the so-called infidels and Hindus in Bombay and Swat Valley. In addition to them, she has three grandchildren who are the children of her eldest daughter, Aisha Shambari. With the passage of time, Irshad learned many things from her parents and children about her past life. She even listened to her speeches and read some of her writings. She came to know a lot of things about herself. Despite that, she couldn't get her memory back. She has not been able to write or speak about Islam since that public crusade. Meanwhile, her writings and speeches that she wrote, published, and delivered before she lost her memory continue to speak for her and do an amazing job. Surprisingly, many Muslims were unable to understand her message until after she lost her memory and died as a battered Muslima woman who was subjected to abuse, torture, and persecution for many years when she was living among true Muslims in Saudi Arabia and Afghanistan. Many Muslims, especially women, admitted that after they heard her speeches and read her writings, they understood that their religion is a religion of terror, abuse, and oppression of women. With the loss of her memory, the terribly abused woman, Susan Peterson, finally got rid of those horrific memories of the abuse, torture, and violence she was subjected to as an Australian Muslim woman named Irshad Shambari by her terrorist husband, Mustafa, and the Muslim Mujahideen. She was also liberated from that horrible nightmare represented by the brutal stoning of the innocent Canadian girl Shahrazad, which had been torturing her every day for all these years. She no longer remembers those terrifying nights that she spent in that dark grave in the mausoleum of Wali Allah Saleh Makkishabik, who was buried years ago in a mountain at the outskirts of Kandahar city. And the 2 nights she's been fighting against the lustful leader of the village of Sharaf al-Banat, who tried to rape her for 2 nights in his house with the help of his evil guards. She also no longer remembers the painful and horrible experience when she was stripped fully naked and dragged on the street of the village Sharaf al-Banat and beaten by many villagers. But she was safe at nick of time by the police of Kandahar. In addition, she no longer remembers those 2 days she's been half buried in a deep, dark hole on a remote reservation of the Canadian Aboriginal First Nation when she was kidnapped and imprisoned by the Mad Black Cow Gang. So her memory lost turned out to be a blessing in disguise. The wealthy Australian woman Susan Peterson, who has more than $85 million, bought a huge mansion in the cosmopolitan city of Sydney and moved her 7 children and 3 grandchildren from her family's residence to her new home. But then she had officially changed her name from Irshad Shambari to Susan Peterson. In addition, she changed the names of all 7 of her children and 3 grandchildren from the Islamic names to Christian ones. She chose all the names of her new children and grandchildren from the names of the 12 disciples of Christ and the names of her daughters and 2 granddaughters from the women who have accompanied the Lord Jesus in the 4 Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, such as Mary Magdalene, Susanna, Joanna, and others that were mentioned in the letters of the apostles to the churches in the New Testament. She even changed her children's last name from Al-Shammari to Peterson. She also removed the name of the evil mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid from her three grandchildren and gave them her Christian last name Peterson. By the way, Suzanne's firstborn was named by her parents Suzanne's son. He, the love child born of her brief friendship with her first boyfriend, a foreign student of a Chinese Buddhism background. When she inquired about giving her son such a rare, exotic name, her mother told her that the family had decided to keep the name of their dear only daughter Susie with them always, so they named her firstborn Suzanne son Peterson. The Australian mother did everything she could to distance her children and grandchildren from their past Islamic lives. She converted them all from Islam to Christianity and took them to church on a regular basis. She even enrolls them in a private Christian school and starts spending the big bucks on tuition and safe transportation on a private bus. She knows if they are still in Afghanistan, none of her 7 children and 3 grandchildren would have gone to school. The boys would have become terrorists and blew their bodies in bits and pieces for the sake of jihad against the so-called infidels and enemies of God. And the girls would have married as underage wives to Taliban terrorists and give birth to more terrorists. But before continuing the narration with an event in the life of the brave Australian mother Irshad Shamari and her children and grandchildren, we have to go back to her painful past and mention what happened to the Muslim terrorists who almost killed her. Who are the Muslim leader in Australia recruited him to carry out this evil assassination plot in Sydney during the Public Crusade. Sydney police have arrested and questioned the shooter who attempted to kill the Australian spokeswoman Irshad Shamari. He happened to be a cultured, highly educated Muslim man born and raised in Australia. His name is Professor Muhammad Yassin. His parents are Arabs who immigrated to Australia before he was born and are originally from the Arab Republic of Egypt, which has an Islamic majority. He has never been to Egypt or any other Islamic country and has lived since childhood in Australia. Accordingly, at first, the Sydney police called him a domestic terrorist, dubbed the Lone Wolf, and it was believed that he planned and carried out the assassination plot alone. He is studying at the University of Sydney. He is in his final year of medical college. He is married and has 7 children. He has 3 Muslim wives. At the same time, one of them was an Arab originally from Lebanon. The second was a Somali who recently immigrated with her family from a refugee camp in Nairobi, Kenya. And the third was a white woman born to parents who traced their ancestry to British settlers who immigrated to Australia more than 2 centuries ago. Only his third white woman is officially registered as his Muslim wife. The last 2 wives are reckoned by the Department of Social Work as divorced from him and living on state welfare financial assistance. However, Muhammad Yassin regularly visits his 3 harems and has sex with them because he considers them to be his legitimate Muslim wives, according to the license given to him by the Holy Quran in Surah An-Nisa 4, verse 3. By sleeping with them, they all gave birth to his children, according to Islam. He has 4 children from his Lebanese first wife, 2 sons from his second Somali wife, and a daughter from his third white British Australian wife. Only his last wife was born a Christian but fell in love with him and converted to his religion as Suzanne Peterson did when she fell in love with the Saudi man Mustafa Shammari and became his Muslim wife Irshad. Mr. Muhammad Yassin of Egyptian origin is a very religious man. He performs all 5 daily prayers at the largest mosque in Sydney City. He is an active member of an Islamic group called Al-Muhajirun Al-Muslimun, which means immigrants Muslims. This group has been banned by the Australian government. The main headquarters in which this Islamic group originated in the United Kingdom in London City has also been banned. Despite this, the members of the group continue to meet secretly in houses and apartments and plan their terrorist plots against the so-called enemies of Islam. Several members of the group are carefully monitored by the Australian police. Before the group was banned, its leaders and other senior speakers had publicly condemned all the secular countries of the West and the secular country of India, which they call the idolatrous Hindu state, and called for the death of America and the destruction of the state of Israel. They organized many demonstrations and called on Western forces to withdraw from Islamic countries in Iraq and Afghanistan. They challenged the Australian government that if those unclean forces of the infidels do not withdraw, the blood of the infidels would be spilled in the streets of Sydney and many of the major Arabian cities. The immigrants called Australia, America, Canada, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Spain, and the Netherlands, India, and any non-Muslim country, Dar al-Harb, or the land of war, for the sake of Allah. And they believe that it is the duty of Islam that Muslims require to declare jihad against the infidels to spread Islam in the countries of Dar al-Harb. In addition, the immigrants are against voting in kuffar or infidel lands. They believe that voting for non-Muslims in any election is against Islam. The immigrants called on the Australian government to allow Muslims to practice Islamic Sharia laws among Australian Muslims. But this impossible demand was completely rejected for a long time. However, the immigrants defied the government's decision and followed their Sharia Islamic laws in their daily lives. Many of them practice polygamy and marry minor female children. Some of them perform female genital mutilation by secretly circumcising the private parts of their small daughters and encourage other Muslim parents to practice FGM on their small girls. Immigrants beat their wives and daughters on their heads, as commanded by the Quran in Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 34. Sometimes they use copies of the Quran books and hit their wives and daughters on the head. They always avoid hitting their woman in the face so that no one can see the scars of their cruelty on the bodies of these better Muslim women. Their fathers or husbands would not allow immigrant women to go to non-Muslim doctors. Muslim men do not allow their wives to go to any male doctor, even if that doctor is a Muslim man like them. Their leaders told them that allowing a Muslima woman to reveal her body in front of an infidel doctor is forbidden and prohibited by Sharia, even if the infidel family doctor is a female like herself. Moreover, immigrants have their own legal lawyers who are Muslims. Therefore, if their women had problems with their men, they were required to go to Muslim legal lawyers. If any immigrant woman defies this restriction, other Muslim families will boycott her and treat her as an apostate Muslima, an impure Christian infidel, or an outcast Hindu woman. All immigrant children are enrolled in a private Islamic school called Dar al Huda, or the House of God's Guidance, and institute of his infallible messenger Muhammad. This school is similar to a public washroom, which has been divided into Dar al Huda for boys and Dar al Huda for girls. Although it is officially registered as one Islamic school, Dar al Huda school is two private Islamic schools under one name. Muslim students have separate classrooms, and Muslim girls have separate classrooms on the same campus at the private Islamic school. All the teachers of Dar al Huda school are Muslim men and women. A non-Muslim, whatever his or her academic qualifications, will not be employed as a teacher at this private Islamic school in Sydney. Even the other male and female employees and the maintenance and cleaning workers are Muslims. The two schools were divided by a wall as high as the Great Wall of China and as strong as the Berlin Wall. From grade 1 to grade 12, students of Dar al Huda school are taught daily an Islamic subject. Each student required to study the main texts of Islam, namely the Quran and the Hadith of the Prophet Muhammad, as well as the history of the early Islamic invasions during the spread of Islam throughout the world by the edge of the sword, euphemistically called the Islamic conquest, when the conquering Mujahideen reached Spain in the west and India in the east. For this reason, only non-Muslim students, male or female, are accepted in Dar al Huda school. In these classrooms, Muslim students, both male and female, are forced to memorize the verses of the Holy Quran and the hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad. In addition, they are taught the history of the Islamic conquest or invasions. They will be told how Islam is spread all over the world through great battles fought by the brave Mujahideen led by outstanding military generals such as Khalid ibn al-Walid, Tariq ibn Ziyad, Taimur, also known as Tamerlane, Babur, Salah ad-Din, the hordes of Mongols and the great Turks, and the great Indian Muslim Mughal Empire, Akbar, among others. Boys and not girls are taught the beauty of the virgins of paradise that God created for the Muslim male martyrs in the jihad who die for God, or the jihad against the infidels and enemies of Allah and His Prophet. Students are told that for every Muslim martyr, God has prepared 72 virgin nymphes or huris. The mermaid or a nymph or a huri of paradise does not urinate, defecate, menstruate, or become pregnant, and she has a circumcised and genitally mutilated, stitched, tight pussy, which is like the eye of a needle. So while fucking the small pussy of his virgin with his big dick, the martyr of paradise enjoys sex with her so much when she wails and bewails due to the pain of penetration. Besides English, male and female students are taught Arabic, Urdu, and Persian languages. The Muslim killer who shot the Australian spokeswoman Irshad Shambari is an official teacher at Dar al Huda School. He teaches Islamic courses and other academic subjects. Besides, he is studying medicine at the most prestigious medical college in the University of Sydney. The plot to assassinate the controversial speaker Irshad Shambari, who is considered the number one enemy of Islam, was hatched in the house of the leader of the Muslim Muhajirun group a week before that general Christian crusade. By the way, it is worth repeating that many Muslims in Australia said that the name of the urban gathering of the public crusade for Christians reminded them of the ancient Arabian crusades waged and fought by the Catholic Church against Muslims over 2 centuries in the Promised Land, which is known today as Israel by the Jews and Palestine by Muslims and Christian Arabs. In any case, the mastermind of the assassination plan is the leader of the Muslim Muhajirun branch of Australia. Therefore, the Sydney police have arrested the shooter, the leader, and the four other prominent members of the bandit group. In fact, Al Muhajirun made two attempts before to assassinate the Australian woman Shad Shammari, but they failed in both of them. Both of their previous plots were foiled by Sydney police. However, the third attempt was successful because the controversial speaker, Shad Shammari, agreed to deliver her speech in an open space. Therefore, this was what made it difficult for the Australian police to prevent their third terrorist plot. Shortly after their arrest, 5 of these Muslim terrorists were tried and found guilty of their cowardly terrorist plot and sentenced to 10 years in prison each. As for the shooter, Professor Muhammad Yassin, who was a teacher at Dar al Huda, he was sentenced to life imprisonment without the opportunity to apply for parole. Chapter 14. The Association of Abused Muslim Women. It took the amnesiac Suzanne Peterson nearly 3 years to fully regain her normal memory and remember all the events of her past life. She undergoes many treatments and brain surgeries before she can remember her past life. During those 3 years, she lived the most wonderful life a mother could have enjoyed with her children and grandchildren. She enjoyed seeing her children gradually grow up and have all the love and care a good mother could give her offspring. All of her children and grandchildren did well in their schools. Most of them became luminarians in the church among their other Christian brethren. Once Suzanne regained her memory, she remembered once again those dark years of suffering, abuse, and persecution she and her children had gone through in the Muslim world. However, she no longer feels the pain and agony she used to feel before she was hit by the treacherous bullet of Islam that made her lose her memory. She considered her survival a divine miracle. She looked back on the agonizing 10 years she spent in the dark and lagging behind the developed world of Islam with these hard-hearted barbarians in Saudi Arabia and Afghanistan as good experiences that God had ordained it for her to go through, to know and feel the pain that almost every Muslim girl and Muslim woman in her life goes through. She spent 3 years in Saudi Arabia, 5 years in Mujahideen camps in Afghanistan, 1 year in a woman's prison in Kandahar city, and 1 year with Muslims in New Delhi, in India. She also spent 4 years kept under lock and key in the Gatmo detention center, which was created for the worst Muslim terrorists in the world. Suzanne Peterson concluded that God had called her to expose the evils of Islam and fight for the rights of Muslim women. So, once she became aware of her past life, she decided to pioneer an association of ex-Muslim women who had gone through the same abusive and oppressive lives and had something to share with the outside world. She was even determined to sponsor any Muslim woman who wanted to escape that infernal and abusive environment and come to live in the West. She also called on female applicants who have already made their way out of the Islamic world and who currently live in Western countries and have painful testimonies of violence and persecution resulting from the misogynistic and unjust teaching of Islam, which they want to share, to send them to her for publication on her account. Hundreds of ex-Muslim women joined Suzanne's Association and boldly shared their pit experiences of being wives to Muslim husbands and daughters to Muslim parents. She began organizing meetings in churches and public places, allowing better Muslim women to speak for themselves and share their testimonies. Suzanne herself shared it many times her bitter experience when she was a Muslim wife in a Muslim with to a Muslim husband. Even her eldest daughter Aisha joined her mother with the Abused Muslim Women Association and shared her heartbreaking story of kidnapping, rape, and house imprisonment when she was a minor child at the age of 10 by that old man, Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid, who justified it in the name of permissible marriage of female children in Surah Al-Talaq 65, verse 4, as well as the bad example of the pedophile Prophet Muhammad, who similarly married, raped, and imprisoned for 9 years a 9-year-old girl under the cover of Islamic lawful marriage of children. His sexual victim was his child bride Aisha, the daughter of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, his friend, whom he married when she was 6 years old and started raping her when she was 9 years old and imprisoned her as a sexual victim for 9 years until he died. There is a fatwa in Saudi Arabia which stated that the Prophet Muhammad for 3 years, from the age of 6 to the age of 9, used to molest Aisha through something called Mufakhazat al-Siqar, or a rape of small children. He used to put his penis between her thighs when she was a child of 6 and rub it gently until he ejaculated on her. The Australian woman Suzanne Peterson invited her American friend Nadia Noor and asked her to come to Australia and share her testimony that she was once the Muslim wife of the notorious white Muslim terrorist leader Muhammad Noor al-Faransawi. Nadia gladly accepted the invitation and traveled with her 2 sons from Chicago to Sydney and shared her testimony at a large gathering of the Abused Muslim Women's Association shortly after her return, and at the urging and encouragement of her American friend Suzanne, Nadia started the first branch of the Society of Abused Muslim Women in the USA. The Australian woman Suzanne spent lavishly on her new branch of the Foreign Society of the Abused Muslim Females, which was founded by her American friend Nadia Noor. Some Muslim women who have been abused have also donated financially. Suzanne encouraged some of the female members to write down their testimonies and send them to her, promising to publish them at her own expense. Accordingly, many women have written and published their experience of abuse and oppression as Muslim wives, sisters, and daughters. Their painful testimonies were circulated all over the world, became famous, and opened the eyes of those who read them among Muslims and among those whom Islam calls immoral female infidels. Many people, male and female, Muslims and non-Muslim, have written to the Association of Better Muslim Women and expressed their feelings and emotional support for those Muslim women who went through such bitter experiences in their painful lives. Irshad has also written a book about her married life in Saudi Arabia and Afghanistan. Their memoirs of her abusive married life, which she lived for 3 years with her abusive Arab husband Mustafa in the Sahara Desert of Saudi Arabia, and memories of her bitter life for 5 years in the Mujahideen camps in Afghanistan, and there she was imprisoned in the prison for Nashis, or a disobedient Muslim woman in Kandahar city. Among the many testimonies given by members of the Society of a Better Muslim Woman, Suzanne Peterson selected 6 remarkable testimonies and included them in her tragic life book that she decided to write and publish. These 7 testimonies are real experiences of pater Muslim woman, an Egyptian girl known as Ikram Hafiz, a Sudanese young woman named Insaf Salah al-Junaid, a Somali wife named Aisha Abdelgadir, a Pakistani sister named Shabana Siddiqui, a Syrian daughter named Layla Haddad, and an American woman who is her beloved friend Nadia Noor, and of course, the brave Australian heroine herself, Susan Bitter, who was once a persecuted Muslima wife named Irshad al-Shammari. This abused Muslim woman endured the most abusive life a woman in the world has ever experienced. Susan chose their testimonies because, in her opinion, this woman had the worst Muslim lives she and had ever heard of. Accordingly, her new book has become one of the best sellers in the world because it includes those 6 heartbreaking testimonies along with her painful testimony. It was read by millions of people and it touched the souls of many people worldwide. The New York Times magazine named it a bestseller for that year. Suzanne's book has been published under the title Irshad and the Abuse of Muslim Women. It has translated and published in Arabic under the same title. As the famous Arab proverb says, its end is mosque. Therefore, the best way to conclude Irshad's novel is that we must mention her second love life, which began with her Good Samaritan lover, her American guard in the notorious Guantanamo Bay Detention Center. The beautiful Australian woman Suzanne did not forget that handsome American guard to whom she revealed her deep love. And he also admitted to her that he shared the same emotional feelings with her. So she allowed him to kiss her on the lips, hug her sexy body, and caresses her breasts and private parts secretly inside her small cell whenever they had the chance to be alone. So her guard turned her confinement into a fortified castle for an imprisoned queen who found a king in a forest surrounded by human terrorists from the Muslim Mujahideen, men who are considered the most evil people in the world. After her release from the dreaded Getmo, the Australian prodigal daughter lost her American guardian angel for some time. Their friendship was revived when the beloved remembered her lover and needed his help in the Swat Valley in Pakistan in arresting the White Devil, the terrorist leader who wanted to be found dead or alive, Muhammad Noor al-Faransawi. May God curse him, and he is now alone, far from his victims of abused Muslim women and underage girls whom he used to rape, locked in a solitary confinement cell in a maximum security penitentiary in the United States of America after being sentenced to life in prison by a criminal court. From that time on, Suzanne continued to talk constantly by telephone, and the two intimate lovers decided to meet and crown their love in a holy Christian matrimonial union. Unfortunately, they did not meet each other until Suzanne was wounded by the tragedy of cowardly Islamic terrorism. When her American boyfriend learned of the tragic accident of his beloved Australian girlfriend by phone from her Christian parents, he came to Sydney City to visit her, but she did not recognize him because she had lost her memory and he became a stranger. Call out to her, as is the case with other dear family members. Despite this, the American Good Samaritan did not abandon the misguided Australian woman he found when she was a suspected terrorist, a mother deprived of her children, and a Muslima widow wife imprisoned in the prison of the worst creatures that ever existed. He treated her, cleansed her of her bad reputation, stained it with the shame of Islamic terrorism, showered her with his inexhaustible love, and introduced her to the Lord Jesus Christ when he secretly gave her a copy of Gideon's Holy Bible and invited her to attend Sunday Mass in the prison church. So during her imprisonment, he gave her the best years of her life in that notorious prison. He even convinced many of her guards and other American Marines of her innocence from charges of terrorism and the sincerity of her conversion from Islam to Christianity, and helped her achieve that noble goal. He also convinced the black priest of the church, who is of African American origin, about her genuine repentance and conversion. For 3 years, the American lover did everything he could to recover the memory of his Australian sweetheart. On his recommendation, Suzanne was transferred to her in her third year to an American hospital in New York that specialized in performing complex neurological and brain surgeries. And the last operation, which was performed by the two best American neurosurgeons specializing in brain and spinal cord surgery, which took 8 hours, was the final straw that brought back to the Australian woman Suzanne Peterson the memory of the persecuted and abused Muslima wife Irshad Shammari, who had been separated from her for 3 years, which begins with her lost love and memories of her loyal guardian angel, the Good Samaritan. To sum up a long story and make it short, the Australian sweetheart Suzanne Peterson married her American lover in a church in Sydney a year after she regained her memory and love. In fact, the former Muslim female prisoner in Guantanamo Bay Detention Center, Irshad Shammari, did not know the name of her Good Samaritan guard until she came out of the long-lost memory through the complex nerve surgeries in her brain. After their marriage, the beautiful bride Suzanne moved with her handsome groom Samuel Wilson to live with him as a Christian husband and wife in New York City. Although his name is Samuel, he is known as Sam. The kind Australian mother, Suzanne took her sons, daughters, and grandchildren with her to live with her in the country of her beloved husband Sam, the Good Samaritan American. It is also known as Uncle Sam's land. Suzanne preferred to live in America rather than Australia because she was still determined to continue her campaign of exposing and destroying the terrorist, misogynistic, and hateful teachings of Islam against non-Muslims, whom that damning Arab religion calls immoral infidels. Her wonderful first year in the USA with her Christian husband, Sam, and the terrifying first year that Irshad stayed in Saudi Arabia with her former Muslim husband, Mustafa, explained to her the vast difference between her second marriage and her first marriage. Her abusive, controlling, and tyrannic first husband took her to the worst and most dangerous country in the world, Afghanistan, where she and her children were exposed to the most terrible types of injustice, persecution, and torment. While her loving and kind second husband, who is according to her a good Samaritan, brought her to the greatest and most beautiful country in the world, America, which is the promised land and is the dream of every human being and every persecuted refugee in the world. On their first visit outside Australia, her Muslim husband forced her to travel with him to his motherland, where they visited the Black House in the city of Mecca, which is called the Sacred House of Allah, where they circumambulated around it and around the black stone, which was carved in the form of a woman's busi, which symbolizes the humiliation of the human female sexually, subduing her and violating the sanctity of her body before the Muslim man who gave him Islam the right, possessing her as a wife, a slave girl, beating her, abusing her, and raping her at any time he wants to fuck her pussy and in any natural sexual way or anomalous practice such as sodomizing her in the ass against her desire. But their first visit outside Australia after marriage was taken by her Christian husband to his homeland, the United States of America, which represents the pinnacle and greatness of Western civilization that was built on the Judeo-Christian heritage, where there is the White House, which symbolizes true democracy and equal rights for men with their male counterparts, and where there is the Statue of Liberty made on the shape of the body of a free, courageous woman carrying in her hand the flame of freedom and independence from the control and tyranny of men. The newly married couple Sam and Suzanne settled in the most beautiful city in the world, New York. We can write a huge volume 10 times larger than the size of this book to show the great differences between the Islamic marital life lived by the Muslima wife Rashad Shamari in Saudi Arabia and Afghanistan and the beautiful Christian marital life lived by the Christian wife Suzanne Wilson in the United States of America. In short, the difference between her Muslim husband Mustafa and her Christian husband Sam is like the difference between night and day, darkness and light, Satan and God. About the author of this novel, Dr. A. Ahmed is an author and scholar. He has 5 university degrees, bachelor's, master and PhD in philosophy and comparative study of religions from India, and BA and MA in religious studies and philosophy from Canada. He was born and raised as a Muslim, but through his studies of philosophy and comparative studies of religions, he converted to Christianity. He has a unique writing style, so he can break through any religious, social, and cultural barriers and reveal the truth as it is. Moreover, his books are based on direct eyewitness testimony because he witnessed with his own eyes the dire circumstances of Muslim women. He wrote 25 books, but he has published 10 of them so far. He wrote all his books in English and translated them into Arabic. All of his books deal with women's issues in Islamic societies and the causes of religious terrorism in Islam.